everyone, and welcome to Week 9's materials in our English 112 Critical Writing and Reading course. Today's lecture is going to cover your annotated bibliography rough drafts, the chapter on the medium is the message, and of course Cicero's 5 canons of persuasion. Now, as you all know, your annotated bibliography rough draft is due this week. Some of you have asked what this will consist of. Now, again, to remind you, your final project will have 10 sources. I know that the sample that I gave you only has 5, but again, it's just an example of how your paper should look and what an A paper does look like, okay? So for your rough draft, you should have at least half of your project. That means at least half your intro, which should be about 1.5 pages, 5 sources properly documented in MLA with their 5 corresponding paragraphs. Make sure that your intro establishes your credibility and also offers a brief history of your topic. I don't want to see any phrases like "my paper will argue." You haven't done enough research yet to be able to state what your argument will be. Again, and this is part of being an ethical researcher. Rather, you should use pointing phrases in your intro like "this paper will discuss," "examine," "analyze," etc. Again, this makes you seem more reasonable because if you say "my paper will argue" up front, it already makes it look like you have reached a foregone conclusion without taking into consideration the various viewpoints. I have also set up a separate discussion forum for your annotated bibliographies. That way, you guys don't have to sift through a bunch of other questions that have to do with other things in the general questions area. If you have any questions about your annotated bibliographies, you can go straight to that forum to see if your question has already been answered. All right, so now on to this week's materials. The medium is the message. Choosing the right medium makes or breaks persuasive moments and is intimately related to kairos, or rhetorical timing. Perform in front of an intended audience. Otherwise, you risk ending up looking like Paris Hilton, Snooki, or Kim Kardashian, which I'm assuming you don't want to do. So, how do we choose the right medium for our message? Well, there's a few things that you have to keep in mind. How fast of a response are you looking for? Remember, it's all about pathetic appeal. Face-to-face encounters are the most persuasive because they involve a combination of logos, pathos, and ethos. Your presentations, which will be the next project that you'll want to tackle in this course, will require you to evoke the senses of persuasion while combining the skillful art of decorum, which of course we know means fitting in with your audience through gesture, tone, dress, etc. Now, we probably don't think about it consciously, but our senses have persuasive qualities, and each sense has their very own persuasive quality. Your language choice in your presentations and papers should evoke the senses. Sound is the most rational sense. It conveys ethos. Music, however, as Heinrichs points out, conveys emotion or pathos. Smell is the most pathetic. It triggers a visceral response. So, say, for example, you baked chocolate chip cookies with your mother routinely as a child. Now, when you smell those chocolate chip cookies as an adult, it still reminds you of those times. Sight leans towards the pathetic because we often believe what we see. Touch is literally pathos or feeling, and taste, like smell, still has to do with pathos. Now, another thing that we probably don't consider consciously because we engage in it so often is that the mediums you use to get across your message also combine various forms of the persuasive appeals. Email has both a combos of logos, because the written word is logic, and also ethos, because you are presenting your character in writing. It makes a very bad form for expressing emotion and garnering sympathy. TV kind of mucks things up as a medium. Images trump sound, therefore it's more pathetic. Instant messaging also smacks of ethos. It's all in the present tense. Otherwise, we wouldn't need our emoticons to convey emotional intent. Now, we have Cicero's 5 canons of persuasion. These are used for inventing the most persuasive of speeches, and will be the format that both your presentations and final papers will take. I mean, after all, who are we to argue with the master of rhetoric? The first canon of persuasion is invention. This is where you dig up the materials for your speech and, of course, your final papers. You're going to want to ask yourself, what do I want? Is my goal to change my audience's mood, its mind, or its willingness to do something? What kind of rhetoric do I need to achieve my goals? Should it be in the past, which we know, of course, has to do with blame? Should it be in the present, which has everything to do with values? Or the future, which has to do with choices? Remember, deliberative rhetoric rests on choice, so framing an argument in the future is probably your best bet. You can also bring in values, but as we know from our reading and class discussion, you want to make sure they are the ones your audience shares. Be careful not to blame any particular individual or group because it tends to put people on the defensive and thus makes them less persuadable. After you have decided what you want from your audience, you need to nail down the issue itself. What is it really about? Again, sorry, hokey pokey. Is the issue simple or complex? If it is complex, you need to break it down into digestible parts or smaller issues. You should also consider what a potential opponent might say about your issue and spend some time framing your argument in response to this. Again, you want to consider your audience's values. What are the commonplaces we've shared as a class over the semester? How can you mirror those commonplaces through code words and tribal talk and etc. to effectively persuade your audience? Is the central issue about values or rights or something else? The next canon of persuasion is arrangement. After you've constructed your basic argument, you will need to arrange it into a cohesive presentation. When presenting your argument, remember to move from ethos, that is, establishing your character, to logos, that is, establishing facts, to pathos, which is establishing an emotional connection. Remember that ethos is reserved for the introduction. You guys have already had practice working on this with your credibility papers and, of course, with your annotated bibliographies. How can you get your audience to like you? Do you share their values? Do you exhibit good sense? Do you show disinterest? That is, their needs come before yours or even hurt you. In short, this again has to do with identity strategy. Make them identify with you and the choices you make. Logos is the meat of your argument. Do you have the facts and figures to back up your claim? Here you can use narration. You'll tell a history of the matter and include those facts and figures. Again, keep it succinct and relevant to the immediate argument. You want to beware of tangential information that distracts from, rather than adds to your goals. Prove your point logically and smack down your opponent's argument. Pathos, or emotion, comes at the end and again asks you to consider what your goal is. Do you want your audience to be charged up through anger, fear, pity, patriotism, or some other emotion? The structure of your speech and papers will follow this schema. The introduction gets your audience on your side. The narration part states the facts. Division lists the points where you and your opponents agree and disagree. Proof is where your actual argument and evidence will go. So again, this is where it will be appropriate to say, after taking all of this information into consideration, this is my argument. This is where we will make choices. After making that proof evident, you're going to then refute your opponent's arguments. And of course, your conclusion will restate the most important parts of your argument and rouse your audience's emotions. At this point in time, I want to remind you guys that these canons are absolutely essential for creating a deliberative and persuasive paper. Therefore, canons with a capital C will be your password for this week's quiz. Make sure you are spelling it correctly. Style refers to proper language, clarity, vividness, decorum, and ornament. Proper language has to do with words that suit the issue and the audience. Again, you're going to want to nail down the key words or commonplaces. Clarity has to do with boiling your argument down to its essential point in a manner that your audience can understand. Vividness creates a rhetorical reality by telling a story with facts and figures. Of course, you're well aware of what decorum is now. It's the skillful art of fitting in. Be like Eminem. Know your audience and know what language and topics suit them and which ones don't. Ornament has to do with the rhyme and pitch of your voice. This will be especially handy when you are creating your presentations. You'll want to speak softly when you want to lure your audience in, and speak with a crescendo when you are building one thing on top of another to reach a climax. Memory has to do with what mental images you associate with particular concepts, ideals, commonplaces, or figures of speech. You'll want to refer to them in your presentation and, of course, your paper. Delivery has to do with, again, presenting yourself and your materials in a confident manner to the class. Remember, you are the expert, and you want to persuade the class to adopt your reasoning and to take action.